There are wounds that don't bleed, but leave an emptiness you carry every single day. Wounds that don't show on the body, but cut through your soul every time a child speaks to you with contempt, ignores you, or blames you for their frustrations. And the most painful part isn't what they do. It's that even after 50, 60, or 70 years, you still find yourself wondering if you deserve to be treated that way. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Some children hurt their mothers without ever apologizing, without looking back, as if the love they received was an eternal right and not an act of sacrifice. And many women keep making excuses for them, settling for crumbs, when what they truly deserve is respect. Today, I want to talk to you about 7 deep wounds. These aren't theories. They're real scars that many have carried in silence. And I want you to stay until the end, because the last one might completely change the way you understand your own story. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. This is not a place to stay silent about pain. It's a place to face it head-on, with strength and dignity. Stay with me. What you're about to hear could be the beginning of your true liberation. Have you ever felt like you were erased without a word? Like you're still there, but invisible? Not because you hid away, but because someone, maybe your own child, chose to stop seeing you. They stopped calling, stopped listening, stopped asking how you're doing. There was no argument, no goodbye, just a silence that settled like a thick fog until you could no longer tell if it was distance or disdain. And the most painful part is that even with that emptiness, you keep making excuses. You keep saying they're busy, that it's modern life, that all young people are like that. But deep down, you know that's not entirely true. What hurts isn't the physical absence. It's the message that absence sends. You're no longer needed. You no longer matter. This is the first point of this video. We're going to talk about the wound of silent contempt, one of the most invisible, yet one of the cruelest, because it doesn't leave visible marks. There are no insults or shouting, just a growing distance, like a crack in the soul. And the worst part is that many women like you get used to that emptiness. They learn to live with it the way someone learns to walk with a stone in their shoe, with resignation, with pain, but without stopping to take it out. Let me tell you something you may have avoided facing. There are children who show contempt without yelling, who abandon you without moving out, who make you feel like a burden, even if they never say it out loud. It's a subtle, sophisticated kind of contempt, but no less painful. And when you've spent years giving everything, sacrificing yourself, always putting others first, that silence becomes a daily slap in the face. I once heard a woman say she felt like a photo on the shelf to her children, always there, always visible, but never touched, never truly seen. That phrase shook me, because it reflects a reality no one says out loud. There are mothers who, after raising, loving, supporting, and healing, end up becoming just that. A picture no one takes the time to look at. A name that comes up on a special occasion, but has no place in their children's everyday lives. Marcus Aurelius said that indifference hurts more than offense because it denies your existence. And that's what stings about silent contempt. Not that they yell at you, but that they ignore you. Not that they argue with you, but that they've decided you're no longer worth their time. And often, that contempt comes from children you gave everything to, even more than you had to give. But here's something you need to hear clearly. You can't keep justifying the unjustifiable. You can't keep dimming your light so others can shine. You weren't born to be anyone's shadow, not even your own children's. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to submit to injustice. It teaches us to recognize what's beyond our control and to live with dignity in that recognition. You can't force a child to see you, but you can choose not to keep waiting for their gaze. That decision isn't easy. It's a grieving process. It's accepting that maybe the bond you dreamed of doesn't exist, that the love you gave won't be returned the way you hoped. But it's also a form of liberation. because it lets you stop begging for affection and start rebuilding your worth from within. And here's the most important part. You don't need anyone's validation to reclaim your peace. Your existence isn't measured by how many calls you get, but by how you choose to live with yourself. God gave you life, not so you could be a mirror of someone else's desires, but so you could learn to stand tall, even in solitude. Maybe it hurts to look at this wound today. Maybe what you're hearing makes you uncomfortable. But if you've made it this far, it's because something in you knows it's time to stop settling for scraps. Time to stop justifying what's been hurting you. Today is the moment to face that wound and say, "This happened to me too, but it doesn't define me," because you still have time to decide what to do with that emptiness. And in that act of dignity, your true awakening begins. At some point, every woman who has been a mother faces a silent question. What happened to the respect I once sowed? Because it's one thing for the years to pass, and another entirely to let your dignity grow old. After talking about silent contempt, there's an even more visible wound we need to face. We've arrived at the second key point of this video, the wound of public humiliation. This doesn't always come in the form of open insults. Sometimes it's a dismissive comment said in front of others. Sometimes it's a mocking laugh when you share your opinion. Sometimes it's the way your son or daughter corrects you like a spoiled child, completely forgetting that it's thanks to you they are who they are. This kind of mistreatment doesn't always shout, but it's always felt. It's a deep wound because it dismantles something sacred, the loving authority you held for decades, and when that breaks, it leaves you feeling like your story has been erased in front of others' eyes. This type of humiliation has deeply rooted emotional causes. Many times, the child who humiliates is the one still trapped in their own unresolved frustrations. Instead of confronting their shortcomings, they project their resentment onto the one person they know won't retaliate with violence: you. Because in their mind, you represent the figure who shaped them the most. And instead of growing up, they choose to return the pain they never wanted to face. They do it with sarcasm, with criticism, with that tone designed to ridicule. But you are not here to carry their unresolved battles. From a Stoic perspective, there's an undeniable truth. You can't control what others say or do, but you can decide how much power you give them over your peace. Seneca wrote that, "The noble soul despises low blows, not because they don't hurt, but because responding from the wound means losing twice." But this doesn't mean staying silent or allowing it. It means acknowledging the harm, setting a clear boundary, and reclaiming your place without sinking into revenge or resentment. When a woman is publicly humiliated by her own child, her inner world shakes. She begins to question her worth, to wonder if maybe she deserves it, to replay over and over everything she might have done wrong. That constant self-doubt is a form of emotional torture, and if it's not stopped in time, it becomes a fog that drains her self-esteem, her energy, and her desire to keep building. In everyday life, this wound shows up in tense silences during family gatherings, in the fear of speaking up, in the sadness that creeps in while doing the dishes or walking alone through the house. It makes you feel like everything you say will be judged, corrected, or dismissed. And little by little you begin to withdraw. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you're afraid of being ridiculed again. But let me tell you something no one may have dared to say before. Being a mother doesn't mean you have to endure disrespect. Your story, your voice, and your dignity are not subject to your children's judgment. If someone tries to shame you for who you are, for how you think, or for the decisions you made out of love, that person is not acting from love. They're acting from their own wounds, and you are not obligated to carry them. God didn't give you life, so you would end up doubting your worth. He gave it so that even in old age, you could walk with your head held high, knowing that while you were imperfect, you always acted from a deep desire to protect and love. And that intention, even if not always understood, deserves respect. Emotional resilience begins when you dare to name what hurts without justifying it. When you say, "What you did hurt me, and I'm not going to allow it anymore." That's not rebellion, it's healing. And even if your voice trembles at first, your soul will grow stronger, because every time you defend your dignity, you're planting a tree where there were only ashes. You don't need everyone to understand your pain. You need to understand it yourself and decide not to carry it alone or in silence. Because humiliating you doesn't make them more mature, but it does make you less free. And you deserve freedom, not one that others give you, but one you claim for yourself. The path to that freedom continues. There are still wounds we need to name, and the next one has to do with love, but not true love, the kind that's only given when you meet certain conditions. Get ready. What's coming next touches a very deep nerve. There's something deeply exhausting about living in constant fear of losing a child's affection, measuring every word, every gesture, every decision, as if their love were a thin rope that could snap at any moment. As if your worth as a mother depended on keeping them happy, even if that means denying yourself. And that precisely is the third wound we need to talk about today, the wound of conditional love. Because a child who only loves you when you do what they expect isn't truly loving you. They're using your need for affection as a form of control. We've reached the third point in this video, and this is where things begin to shift. Because this pattern doesn't just oppress you, it wears you down emotionally. Living to please so you won't be rejected is a form of self-abandonment. And many women, especially after 50, fall into this trap without even realizing it. They keep giving away their energy, their time, their peace, everything, in the hope that if they give just a little more, they'll get back a bit of the love they once believed was real. But that kind of conditional love isn't love. It's a manipulated emotional contract where you always give more and receive less. From a Stoic perspective, there's a key truth that can set you free. Your worth is not negotiable. Epictetus said that anyone who depends on the applause of others has lost their freedom, and that includes the applause of a child. Because if every decision you make is filtered through the fear of losing their approval, then you're not living from your center, you're living from their judgment. The strategy here isn't easy, but it's necessary. It's about reclaiming your access. And it starts by setting a reverse condition. I love you, but not at the cost of my peace. That phrase, said with inner conviction, can mark the beginning of a new chapter. It's a clear boundary, but not an aggressive one. It works because it shifts the focus. It's no longer about pleasing to be loved, but about standing firm in your own dignity. And dignity at this stage of life isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. Imagine you're in an old house, one you built with your own hands. Over time, your children hung pictures, moved the furniture, painted over your original colors, and one day you realize the house doesn't feel like yours anymore. So you decide to reclaim one room, just one, a space where no one else gets a say, where you can arrange things however you like. That room is you. And what you do by setting boundaries is move back in. It's not about stopping your love for your children. It's about loving yourself too, about remembering that you've been a mother, but also a woman, a soul, a body, a voice. And you weren't born to be shaped at anyone's will. Now I want to invite you to do something. If this reflection is stirring something in you, subscribe to the channel and click like. Not for me, but because it keeps this community alive. This space where we talk about what others prefer to silence. Tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and write the phrase, "I choose not to beg for love." Because that's exactly what you're doing when you set this boundary. You stop begging and start choosing yourself. There are still deeper wounds to name, and the last one, as always, might be the one that changes your life the most. Stay with me. This process is just beginning. When you decide to stop begging for love and start placing yourself at the center of your own life, a new clarity emerges. But so does a difficult silence, the one that settles in when the relationships that once filled all your space begin to reveal themselves for what they truly are. It's in that space, often uncomfortable, where true rebuilding begins. And this brings us to the fourth point in our journey, the wound of emotional replacement. This isn't about competition or jealousy. It's about a deep, piercing feeling, the sense that you're no longer needed, that you've been replaced without explanation, that someone else, a partner, a friend, a phone, a routine, has taken the place that for years you believed was yours. This is one of the most subtle and painful mental traps for those who've passed the age of 55, because it doesn't arrive with shouting. It's not openly discussed, it just happens, and you find yourself wondering if you're overreacting, if you're being selfish, if you're wrong for feeling what you feel. This trap creeps in slowly, like dust settling in a house no longer lived in. At first, you comfort yourself by saying it's normal, they have their own lives now, everyone changes. Then you start justifying their absence with phrases like, they have so many responsibilities, I don't want to be a burden, I'd rather they be happy with whoever they chose. But deep down, you know there's something you're not naming. It's that sting of feeling replaced. As if the years you spent together were just a prelude, and now you've been filed away as part of the past, not the present. This idea is destructive not because of its social implications, but because of what it does to your inner perception. It begins to erode your sense of belonging, your ability to make an impact, your place in the world. When you feel like you no longer hold a real emotional space in your children's lives, you begin to shrink your presence in every area. You speak less, suggest less, show up only when called. You become cautious, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Fear of being a burden, fear of confirming you're no longer a priority. And that caution, which in another context could be a virtue, becomes an invisible prison. One you build yourself, brick by brick, from the belief that you no longer have a rightful place in their lives. From a Stoic perspective, this pain must be faced with strength, not resignation. Because while you can't force anyone to choose you, you can choose not to abandon yourself. Marcus Aurelius said the soul is strengthened when it accepts its place in the universe, without envy, but also without surrender. This isn't about fighting for a place that no longer belongs to you. It's about creating a new one from where you are now. You can't be the emotional center of someone who's chosen another orbit, but you can reclaim your own center and build from there, because waiting for them to see you like they used to is a slow way of disappearing. The answer isn't to confront or to plead from nostalgia. The answer is to look honestly at what's happening, to accept the natural movement of life, and from that acceptance, decide how you'll rebuild your emotional space. Not to compete, not to force, but to remember that your presence does not depend on anyone else's validation. God didn't replace you. Life hasn't discarded you. But you need to decide whether you'll stay present in your own life or give up that space too. This is a radical decision. And if you make it, not from pain, but from truth, you'll see that the most important place you can still occupy is very much available. The place of someone who refuses to be replaced by forgetfulness. The place of someone who chooses to return to herself again and again, like returning to the only temple that can never be torn down. Because that temple is you, and it still has so much to offer. We've now reached the fifth point of this video, and it touches a wound that often disguises itself as justice, but is really punishment. We're talking about the wound of unfair blame, that form of aggression that doesn't yell, but accuses, that doesn't seek dialogue, but passes judgment. When a child begins to reduce your life to a list of mistakes, saying you were too strict, too absent, too poor, too much yourself, they're not seeking clarity. They're looking for someone to blame for their own confusion, and often, out of love, guilt, or exhaustion, you accept that role. You become the figure they need to justify their frustration. But who stands up for you against that distorted version of your story? Unfair blame isn't just a harsh sentence in a tense conversation. It's a dynamic that settles in like slow poison. And the more time passes, the more it convinces you that you failed as a mother, even though deep down you know you did the best you could with what you had. That emotional distortion begins to reshape your self-worth until you start doubting your own truth. You find yourself going over old decisions, regretting moments you can't change, apologizing for pain you're not even sure you caused. And the most damaging part is that when you silently accept the role of the guilty one, you lose more than just your child's respect. You lose your own. The real consequence of living trapped in someone else's blame is a life lived in penance. Not as a spiritual act, but as emotional punishment. And that punishment shows up in your body, your health, your eyes. You become more fragile, more insecure, more eager to please. You stop setting boundaries, stop protecting your time, stop caring for your own space. You become someone who exists to make up for something, not to live. And that's not motherhood, that's emotional slavery. But as painful as this situation is, it's not irreversible. You can't change the past, but you can change the position from which you view it. Blame only has power if you accept it as the absolute truth. But when you choose to see yourself with honesty and compassion, when you recognize yourself as a woman who did what she could, who also suffered, who also made mistakes, who also needed help that never came, something shifts. Guilt turns into awareness, and awareness into strength. To break this pattern, you need a different perspective. You are not the source of your child's pain. You may have influenced parts of their story, just as they've influenced yours, but you are not their executioner, their burden, or their excuse. You are a person with a full life that deserves to be seen with fairness. Emotional justice doesn't mean denying your mistakes. It means putting them in context, seeing them with the same compassion you show to others' wounds. And from there, choosing not to accept a judgment without defense. Because you deserve to be heard too. You deserve to say, "This is what I lived, this is what I gave, and this is what I will no longer tolerate." Marcus Aurelius wrote that those who judge themselves justly no longer fear the judgment of others. That's what's at stake here. It's not just about repairing a relationship, it's about repairing your inner image. Looking at yourself and saying, "I was enough, not perfect, but enough." That statement, spoken from the soul, can begin to heal wounds that have been open for decades. And while the road ahead won't be easy, it will be yours. And that alone is a powerful beginning. After seeing the weight so many women carry from living under their children's constant reproach, one question becomes inevitable. How much longer will you keep sacrificing your peace for those who only see you as a reminder of a past that makes them uncomfortable? Because when you realize you've spent years apologizing for mistakes you can no longer fix, the urgency to wake up becomes undeniable. And that's where one of the quietest, most devastating wounds comes in. Functional abandonment. We're now at the 6th point in this video, and we're no longer talking about shouting or blame or even physical presence. We're talking about the kind of abandonment that can't be seen from the outside, but eats away at you from within. The kind where you're still in your children's lives, but only as a name on their phone, a useful figure, not someone who deserves care, attention, or genuine companionship. I want you to imagine a scene. It's Sunday afternoon. You're sitting in your living room, your phone nearby, waiting for someone to call, for someone to ask how you're doing, for someone to say, "I miss you." But the hours pass and no one shows up. Not because they're traveling or dealing with an emergency, they just don't feel like calling. and you convince yourself they're busy, that they'll call tomorrow, that you shouldn't expect too much. But deep down, that silence isn't temporary. It's become routine, and that routine starts to blur you out. It turns you into someone who only exists when there's a problem to solve, a favor to do, a task to complete. The rest of the time, you're just a quiet shadow, waiting, serving, not causing trouble. That's the cruelest form of abandonment, the kind that keeps you close just to use your time or your body, but never your soul. This kind of subtle neglect has consequences many would rather not face, because admitting that your children no longer include you emotionally hurts more than any insult. It hurts because it destroys the illusion of family. It hurts because it forces you to confront the truth. You gave everything, and yet it's not enough to receive even the bare minimum in return. And if you don't name that truth, it eats away at you. It weakens your immune system, steals your appetite, turns you silent, not out of wisdom, but out of resignation. And that kind of resignation isn't maturity, it's emotional exhaustion. The worst part of functional abandonment is how easy it is to normalize. You start to accept not being invited, not being told anything, not being part of important decisions. You get used to being the last to know, to being kept in the dark so you won't worry. But the truth is, they don't tell you because they no longer see you as an active part of their emotional life. And you know it, and still, you stay. Because the fear of being completely alone feels heavier than the pain of being invisible. But there's a choice that can change everything. A choice that doesn't depend on them. It depends on you. It's called dignity. And it begins when you decide that you will no longer be available to those who don't stop to ask how you are. When you choose to believe that your presence, your time, and your affection aren't bargaining chips, but expressions of love that deserve to be met with love. That decision is radical. And yes, it might mean they reach out to you less. But it can also give you back something far more precious, the certainty that you don't have to be useful to be loved. God didn't design you to be functional. He designed you to be light, and a light that only turns on when others need it will eventually burn out. Today you can choose something else. You can stop begging for attention. You can start rebuilding your worth, not from silence rooted in waiting, but from silence rooted in clarity. Because waiting to be seen is another way of postponing your own awakening, and you're no longer here to wait. You're here to live what's left with your head held high, even if it hurts, even if you tremble, even if it means starting with yourself. After facing the reality of functional abandonment and understanding that dignity cannot depend on whether you're called, invited, or included, we now arrive at the heart of this reflection. Because beyond your children's silence, beyond their disregard or distance, there's a wound only you can heal. This is the 7th point of the video, and here we're going to talk about the wound of inherited shame. The kind of shame that didn't begin with you, but that you've been made to carry as if it were yours. That feeling that your story, your decisions, your mistakes are to blame for everything your children say they're going through. They accuse you of being too harsh, of not giving enough, of not knowing how to love. And in your effort to be fair, you start to believe it. You begin to think that because you weren't perfect, you deserve their judgment. That because you failed at something as if it were possible not to, you must spend the rest of your life making up for it. But stop. Because that guilt you're dragging around doesn't belong to you, and carrying it is the fastest way to erase yourself completely. There's something profoundly unjust about a woman who gave everything, often without help, without a support system, without rest, ending her days apologizing for not having been enough. There is no act more violent than turning a mother's love into a lifelong debt. And yet, many accept it. Not because they believe they deserve it, but because they're exhausted, because they no longer have the strength to fight for their version of the story. But if you've made it this far, let me be clear, you are not alone. And you can still reclaim your place. You don't need to convince anyone. You just need to remember that your life is not defined by the eyes of someone who never tried to understand you. What you did, what you held back, what you lost, it all matters. And if someone refuses to see it, it's not you who should feel ashamed. Owning this truth isn't easy, because it means letting go of the illusion that someday you'll finally hear the thank you that never came. It means accepting that maybe the recognition you deserve won't come from others. It will come from you, from the way you choose to see yourself, to treat yourself, to honor yourself from now on. That is the real transformation, to stop making excuses for being mistreated and start living with your head held high, knowing you survive things others don't even have the courage to remember. Shame is not your inheritance. It is the burden of those who never learn to love without blaming. Don't wear it. Don't repeat it. Don't let it become your identity. If you want a new beginning, this is the first step. Let go of the guilt that isn't yours. Decide that you will no longer die waiting for understanding. Decide that your story is worthy, even with its shadows. And most of all, decide that you deserve to live out your life free of burdens you never chose. There is no redemption without truth. And here is yours. You weren't perfect, but you were real. And in a world full of absence, that has more value than you can imagine. Getting to this point is no small thing. Not everyone has the strength to look themselves in the eye, to acknowledge wounds most people would rather keep hidden, to listen without justifying what hurts. If you're still here, it's because something inside you refuses to keep living numb, denying what has hurt you in the name of love. This video hasn't been a comfort or a gentle pat on the back. It's been a mirror, and mirrors, when faced with honesty, are uncomfortable, but they also awaken. Today, you've heard words you might not have known you needed, and now that you have, you can't remain the same. You're standing before an undeniable decision: to keep waiting for respect where there is none, or to start living with the resolve of someone who has chosen never to beg again. I want you to leave a comment with the phrase, "My story deserves respect," along with the country you're watching from. Because that truth you just spoke to yourself internally now deserves to be spoken out loud. My name is Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. I'm not here to entertain you or fill your screen with empty phrases. I'm here to offer words that awaken, that challenge, that reignite something that's been asleep for far too long. This channel exists because there are many women like you who no longer want to live in silence. Women who know they can still rebuild, but who need a voice that looks at them with respect, not pity. Subscribe if you haven't already. Not because it's a routine, but because being part of this community means something real. You're ready to take control of your life, to live the years ahead without owing anyone an explanation. Share this video if you know someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, a single word is enough to help a woman stop blaming herself for loving and start recognizing herself for everything she's carried alone. And don't let this conversation end here. 2 more videos will appear on the screen now. Choose the one that speaks to you the most, because what starts as a reflection can become a point of no return. Today, you didn't just watch a video. You started a journey. And that journey, if you choose it, has no turning back, no